Welcome back, everybody, to the Nissim Black Show on Moral Edge. I have an amazing interview. I am sitting down right now with Ari Teman, who is an entrepreneur, a comedian, and a fearless truth teller. I begin this program with wanting to hear about his story. And if you haven't been privy to his story, you are going to hear something that you probably have not heard unless you've been watching what's been going on with leftist media over the last year and a half. But this is a different take on it. I initially thought I would hear his story. I did not think in 1,000 years that I would have heard my story in his story. And it was a valuable lesson for me. And I think we share things. And I think that it'd be a valuable lesson for all of you as well. This is my interview with Ari Teman. Ari, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you being here with me. I have a bunch of questions. We were talking a little bit off camera before just about the justice system, the lack of credibility it has. Not only the justice system, I would say almost today, the news, mainstream media, almost everything that was a trusted establishment today is always questioned. Everybody questions it. Nobody takes anything for face value anymore. More and more people are looking for other outlets that are non-conventional to be able to get whatever information it is, whether it's the news, whether it's whatever. And for a person like me who, you talk about the news, I don't think until Corona, I think it was until Corona, 2020, prior to that, I hadn't seen the news, not even for the weather, for at least 10 years. Oh, wow. I didn't see the news. Nothing. The whole entire...
You never got stuck in an airport.
Never got,
That's the only time you see CNN.
It's only CNN, right? You're right, in the airport. And all I did was see them like bash Trump on the, on the thing. And every once in a while, I'm in the airport. I flew a lot, 100 days out of the year, I was traveling, touring, or whatever. And so the news would be on, and they're saying something bad about Trump. But at the end of the day, like I even that I didn't take for face value. For me, I have a, from a rule, I never vote for a Democrat. So for sure, whoever's on the right, that's who I was going to vote for as a president. So did I care or think about whatever the case is? That was just my duty. So I didn't care and didn't know what nuances.
Where'd that come from?
That came from my father.
Yeah?
It came from my father. Very, very interesting. Not only is it interesting that it came from my father, who was a black man, who happens to be a pastor, but there's a difference with my father. I will say that he's very pro-Israel. He's conservative. I remember my father. He sat me down. He said, "Son, you should know that the Democrats were the ones who kept us in slavery. They were the ones who were fighting for us to keep us in slavery." This is my father telling me.
Joe Biden was Crime Bill Joe.
Yeah, Crime Bill Joe. Exactly.
Every now and then when I'm walking around, I love to walk around Tel Aviv, and I've got a tiny dog, a little sidekick.
That's like very Tel Aviv, by the way.
Very Tel Aviv, like a little Australian Shepherd. People ask me how big she's gonna get. I'm like, you can't do that with a human baby. But all right.
Right.
How big is she gonna get? Well, it depends if someone breaks up with her.
Right.
But you meet these like young Israelis and they hear, oh, you're from Miami Beach, you're from New York, and they get like, glossy-eyed, right? And I feel like it's incumbent upon me to be like, no, this is the place for Jews. And then, something that I'll explain is like almost everything in the United States is backwards. Everything you hear, everything that it promises is backwards. And the immigrants, the people who they're coming from Cuba, they're coming from Venezuela, they're coming from the former Soviet Union.
Right.
They hear the promises and they go, no, I've heard these promises before. And I know they're the opposite. Just like what's going on in New York City right now. Our guys are going to go, we're going to have government grocery stores. It's like, man, if you studied history, that's the DMV of the grocery store, right?
Exactly.
You don't want that.
You don't want that. One of the main reasons why. The DMV, out of all the places, worst customer service.
Yeah.
Worst customer service.
Yeah.
It's almost it's almost a regular store here.
You're better off at the DMV than the...
You're right.
It's... humans want to excel. They want to succeed, right?
Right.
It's funny. Rabbi Sachs was talking about in this week's Parsha, right? Korach gets upset at Moshe, and he goes, well, who are you to lead, right? I'm paraphrasing. And he goes, well, it's the right question, but the motivation was wrong because it was coming from ego versus faith and concern, right? Like, why can't I be the leader and in charge? It's like, no, you don't understand the leadership here. Moshe Rabbeinu is described 18 times in the Torah as the servant of Hashem.
Right.
That's his praise, that he was there to serve. And the genuine leader is
Serves.
serving his people to uplift them and help them reach another level, right?
Right.
That's why we look at Moshe and we call him our teacher. That's the greatest accolade.
Right.
You know, speaking about the media, speaking about the American institutions, that's maybe the fatal flaw, is that where you have this sort of Marxist, socialist, Democrat, they claim that they're there to support you and to help you, but really they want to control you.
Exactly.
Really,
Absolutely.
they're the Korach. They
Right.
have this top-down, we're gonna tell you how to live your life.
Exactly.
And we're gonna lock you in a cage if you step out of bounds. We're gonna break you, and we're gonna force you into submission. And it's clearly driven by fear.
Right.
You don't lock a non-violent human being in a cage
Right.
unless you're very afraid
Yeah.
and you have an incredible scarcity mentality and a complete lack of faith in the ability to revitalize.
It's control and tyranny. It's, people ask today, they say, the thing by them is like, could it really be? When we look back in the ancient times, you think of the Alexander the Greats or Pharaoh or all of these dictators and tyrants that were there before in the past. People say, could it really be that today? I said, just because they have a different suit on doesn't mean that there can't be. People still want the same power. They want the same control. You look at Khomeini. Look at all the people that he put behind prison because of going against his regime. It's the same
Exceptional
thing.
paranoia. And
Exactly.
And when you look at
Exactly.
these folks, you go, they're in their own created prison.
Exactly.
Like the somebody once explained to me once, like this coach. He said, the only safe position is equal, because if you're on top of somebody else and controlling them, or someone else is on top of you controlling you, your natural inclination is to want to even things out, and to do that, you're going to want to flip it around. It takes a long time to check your ego, and it's a constant effort to say, okay, let's all be equal. And you see it, it's just human nature, right? Like
Right.
children, as they grow up, they go through their periods of rebellion, and from the 2-year-old pushing stuff off the table to see who they can manipulate and control, right?
Right.
So you've got to be able to manipulate the world. You've got to be able to be assertive and also establish boundaries. But then at a really, really unhealthy extreme, you have these people who are just living in fear. And part of that is they've put themselves in a position where they're a target, right? So if you're
Right.
Khomeini or any leader, we see what happened with Elon Musk and Doge, where immediately,
Right.
it was actually the same judge that I have, Friday night, Dafka, the emergency judge, even though it
Yeah.
was emergency, issues an order with no case law cited, no actual reason, just blocks it. And Elon, to his credit, saw right away, hey, this is a corrupt judge.
Right.
And now he's facing impeachment. 2 congressmen
Right.
filed articles of impeachment. And you go, well, what's this guy afraid of? And then it turns out that his wife is getting a lot of aid money
Right.
through this allegedly corrupt system.
Right.
And so what's really going on is they have this immediate fear response because they've spent the last decades of their life being incredibly corrupt,
Incredibly
and cheating.
corrupt. And now that it's an idea, it's a concept that's actually brought down in a lot of the Jewish esoteric books, but really in Chassidut and Chassidus, that talks about the future and the Atid, what's going to be in the future. And right before the revelation, the great revelation of God's light, of the Messiah, or anything, what happens is that what we understand and what was prophesied is that the other side of darkness has to bring in every last little bit of strength that it has to try to block out the light, because it knows inherently that its time is up. The time is almost up. It's being finished. It's about to be exposed for the darkness that it actually is. And so right before the exposure actually happens, it gets the darkest, right?
Yeah.
Which is really which really connects to the the darkest hours in the middle of the night. This is
Darkest
when
before
robbers
dawn.
come in. Most
Yeah.
burglaries happen at at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning.
You're seeing
And then-
now, it's funny because Elon Musk is this sort of seminal character in
Right.
history, but like from a Torah perspective,
Right.
there's this idea that like, okay, well, what's going on right now? These guys, they don't seem to understand that they live in the internet era, in the
Yeah.
X, formerly known as Twitter. How gangster is this administration? Like the president's a convicted felon.
Right.
Elon Musk renamed his company to one letter, formerly known as. Like, when you got a formerly known as, I'm surprised that like we don't have president symbol. He's like, well, Prince did it, like it's just some piece of gold or something like that. Right? But
Definitely
just a letter too. I didn't see he posted a video like Daddy's home, and I'm like, man, prison hearted you. He was just in central booking for 5 minutes, and he comes back at his daddy. But
Complete comedy, by the way. Complete
it's
comedy.
unbelievable. People go to me, you're a convicted felon. I'm like, yeah, like the president of the United States.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to see that like the light is speeding up the same. I think faster than the darkness, but it's always this race, right? So they post a lie, and it used to be okay. It'd be on some court docket, and they expect that like okay, a few weeks later, a few months later, or years later, someone will read that and believe what the judge wrote. But now there's like a live Twitter feed and commentary. Where top law professors and pundits and experts and lay people who now have even more strength with ChatGPT and Grok,
Right.
they take a ruling and they feed it in, and it's torn apart right away.
Right
So
away.
like
Right
I'm
away.
dealing with the same corrupt judge, and it's like it used to be he'd issue some order or some ruling and be like, oh man, now I got to spend a week or two going through this thing and tearing it apart. And now you download the PDF, and you upload it to ChatGPT and Grok, and you go, just dissect this for me. And I think the robots are upset at my judge.
Right.
If I were him, I'd be careful around a Roomba. He starts getting tripped by his back. But God forbid. Yeah,
God forbid.
you should repent.
At least, so let's go into the story. Let's go into what happened, how you became a convicted felon.
Yeah.
Because I think that, you even have something that I don't have.
important to have
You have
conviction.
more street cred than I have. I'm not a convicted felon.
No.
So-
But I won't say Bishatova. No. So, well, I'll talk about a very inspiring guy I met named Brian who taught me that really everybody has their own prison.
Right.
Right.
That's
So
true.
we'll get to that.
Very
but-
true.
So I guess I'll step back. So I was still I'm a stand-up comedian.
Not standing now, you're sitting. But.
No, I am sitting, but we could do this standing and just mess with the camera guys and their tripods. But I was doing stand-up for years. I had some surgery and needed like 6 months to recover. And it was kind of a wake-up call. Like stand-up comedy is kind of like a plumbing job, right? Like if you hurt your back and you're a plumber, you better own the plumbing company,
Right.
or you got to go on disability and call for help, right? Or
Right.
have a lot of savings and hopefully recover. So I said, okay, I got to get back into the tech scene. My nickname in my yeshiva high school was .com because
.com.
I had a website, and I'd sit in the back of the rooms, me and two other friends with laptops, and we'd take notes. And then back then we had the Sansino. Like that's talk about age yourself in the Jewish way, but like we didn't have Art Scroll, and we'd take notes, and the kids would go online and they'd study. And the rabbis would get upset. They'd be like, the kids are not paying attention in class. You go to Ari's website and get like the study notes for whatever the test is on the Gemara. My dad was like, I'm confused because it seems like you're complaining that my son is studying and teaching
Right.
the rest of the students.
Teaching the rest of the
It's like, but they're not paying attention in class. It's like, that's like a you problem. But,
Definitely not what they had in mind.
so yeah, whatever. It's worst
You,
things
so you
can
were
happen.
ChatGPT before ChatGPT.
I was ChatGPT. I was Notepad.
You Notepad.
Notepad plus plus.
I used to have another one. What was the other one? Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah,
something like
Cliff
that.
Notes.
Yeah,
Something like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So yeah, I was Gemara for dummies, and I was almost in that cheer. But anyway, I was a .com kid, and I was doing okay, and I was able to buy myself a car, and it was .com era. People were throwing money around. It was a lot of fun. And then people always said, "Oh, you should try stand up." And I thought for a while it wasn't a noble job. Like you're just going around clowning. And then when I was younger, I just had a terrible flu. I was laying out on the couch, like you're so sick that like the armrest of the couch is what's holding your head up.
Yeah, exactly.
And no appetite, just you feel like a dirty rug, know?
Yeah.
And I'm flipping through the channels, and Kevin Nealon's special was on, and I'm watching it, and it goes to commercial, and I get up and I go to the fridge, get something to eat, and I realize like, oh man, I feel so much better, and it literally was only like
Kevin Nealon?
4 or 5 minutes. Yeah, Kevin Nealon. And I got to meet him a couple years ago. He released this great book of caricatures and stories. And I got to thank him in person. And Dave Barry, was this comedy writer I liked as a kid, he was there as well. It was a very, very nice moment to be able to say thank you to someone who. So it was like a wake up call that like, no, comedy is also this noble use of your life, right? And then right in the Gemara, there's stories about the guys who make people laugh and joke. They go to heaven, and I could use all the help I can get there. So. Although I've gotten more than 3 couples married, so now I could just be a terrible human being and I'm still covered.
Yeah, good.
I don't know if the loophole
I'm only at 2.
Yeah, one more, and then you
working on my third.
You get your third, and then it's cheeseburgers and lighted fires on Shabbat. No, don't take I'm not a rabbi. I barely get through the art scroll. But anyway, so I start this company, and then we launched this like smart intercom that turns your building into a doorman, tracks who's coming into your building, who's not. We're doing well, thank God. And then New York City changes the law, and it says you can't raise the rent after you evict people. And a lot of the landlords were buying this intercom called Gate Guard, still called Gate Guard. And in the hopes that they'd catch an Airbnb or a drug den or an illegal sublet, somebody who wasn't using the apartment as a home. I'd been concerned when we started that we'd be like kicking grandmothers out, but
the rent control.
Rent stabilization and rent control. And it's another good example of like the government presumably having a good idea but taking it too far and backfiring. So they had these laws that said, look, you can't raise the rent unless you evict people. So what that did is it attracted these really aggressive guys who were buying buildings, having in mind to kick people out of their homes. And so they were using our technology to hunt for Airbnb. And I'd say 90-something% of the time, the Airbnbs we caught, they were so frequently used that nobody was living in the apartment. Like once in a while, you catch someone, they went away for the summer and they Airbnb'd it. In those cases, the judges, even though they technically weren't allowed to, would find some loophole to let the person keep their home. But oftentimes there are people like, and it was kind of like a dumb crime. They had a $650 a month Lower East Side apartment.
Wow.
And they're making $3,000 to $6,000 a month renting it out. But like, where are you going to get a $600 a month apartment? You know?
Right.
So, so it was doing well. And then New York City says we can't raise the rent more than 1%. But that's pointless. Like you can't pay the lawyer to file the eviction for the 1%. So we have clients that just stop paying their bills. And New York City landlords weren't great at paying their bills in the first place. And we have these very aggressive terms because we sort of finance the device over 10 to 30 years. You pick your...
Okay, got it.
And so you pay very little up front. It's like your cell phone, right? Like if everybody had to pay $1,400 for their iPhone, they'd sell very few iPhones. But you pay 30 to 50, $70 a month. You know, but if you stop paying, they're gonna collect the whole thing in one shot.
Exactly.
And penalties and whatever. So we're sort of like a cell phone plan, same model. And guys stopped paying, and we warned a bunch of them. Our corporate lawyer warned them in email, said you're bound by these terms and these payment terms, and you owe these fees. And one guy says, "Hey, I'd like a release from this, and I'll try your new stuff. I'll buy your new stuff." I'm like, "We're not going to sell you more stuff. You don't pay for the first stuff." And heck of a negotiating strategy.
It's amazing.
I stole this stuff from you, but I'll promise to take more stuff from you. And he owed us about $264,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, which for a startup company, we were bootstrapped. We not too many Silicon Valley funds investing in stand-up comedians who went to Brandeis.
I was in Brandeis actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Did a concert.
We'll do better.
No,
the Jews are great. Oh, it's a Jewish summer camp.
The Jewish summer camp.
We love camp, which, given our history, is strange. But which kind of camp is this? Let's always check. Always check. So we warn him for, and my lawyer says to me, he goes, look, he writes this, he goes, you don't hit these accounts out of the blue, because if you drafted my account for 260 grand out of the blue, I'd call the cops. So
Exactly.
he warns him for 3 months. I follow his advice. He's copying me on the emails. Guy asks for release. We say no. We give him an itemized list. And we go to the bank and we do what's called a telecheck, which is like a paper ACH. Because with a telecheck, you don't pay the 1.5% fee.
So these are the ones that you could like print offline.
Yeah, it says draw per contract.
Draw per contract.
No
Okay.
signature required. And we even put note to bank. Here's our phone number. Here's the link to the online terms. Call us with any questions. And we draft the account. And we did it to a handful of clients, to 5 or 6. We paired somebody's device or whatever, and he hadn't paid his bill, this or that. And this one guy who owed us 260 grand, he goes to the branch in his local neighborhood near his home, not the one that he always does business with. He goes to some friend or cousin or buddy. And she says, well, get a police report and say that you don't have any business with this guy, which is a lie. He's emailing my lawyer. He's got 11 or 12 of my devices. And so,
wow. And it was that easy. He could just go get.
He got a police report, and then this was I think in May. Our accounts get frozen. Our lawyers emailing the bank and saying, Bank of America, hey, look, we have a contract like this, and there's no sign of any arrest or anything else. But we're like, hey, we have a contract. Here are the emails. Here's the invoices. Here's the terms. And this is my lawyer saying this, right? And the bank does not give this information over to the feds or the detective, who, by the way, this detective has a pattern of mistaken arrests for this bank.
Okay.
He's their go-to phone call.
He's their go-to phone call, right.
And he gets the surveillance footage and he sees these telechecks and he goes to this rookie AUSA who had never done a financial fraud crime before. Right. He'd been working in sex crimes. Prosecuting them. I don't know what he does in his personal life. And who knows with SDNY. But where's the Epstein list? All right. So we're not going to out ourselves. Anyway, so he arrests me for possession of a forged instrument, says on the thing. If they think I'm a dumb forger.
Right.
Somehow they think I built a whole hardware startup.
How many checks was it?
We broke every fee into a specific itemized list. So it was like 27 items.
Okay, got it.
But among these 3 customers.
Because originally you said something about 5, so I'm like, you can't be a con artist on 5 checks. Like,
no, but it was also like they're itemized with the fee on the memo. Like this was like right, and it means also you're standing in the bank for an hour as the teller's typing this in. There's no disguise. There's no we had a chat for mysteriously the bank lost the video of the hour chat with the manager and everything else. Yeah, it's very sketchy. Wow. This Brooklyn detective, U.S. Marshals, and the Miami Beach PD show up in our WeWork. In South Beach, and the guy says, Ari, you got to come with me. Walking out, I asked my friends to call a lawyer, whatever, and it's a good thing about being in a WeWork.
Right.
And I'm in a good mood because I'm like, I know this guy filed this bogus charge back. I'm pretty sure that's what this is about.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to, this guy's, he's managed 150 buildings. They just had me falsely arrested. I know he did this chargeback.
Wow.
And I end up, actually, my next door neighbor, I end up in FDC Miami. They DAFCA arrested me July 3rd at 4 in the afternoon. They showed up at 2 first to my apartment. They came to the office at 4 so that I'd be stuck for 5 days in federal prison where there'd be no judge to bond me out.
Oh, my goodness.
And I end up, my next door neighbor was Kodak Black.
Oh, really?
No, Mishpacha, no. He was actually
not related.
He was looking at he meets me. So there was this great. I you be careful. If you compliment a correction officer, they'll go and they'll fire him. So
wow.
He was just okay. I had this correction officer who at least had the wisdom, the seichel to go. Okay, he looked at he's flipping through like these index cards of what people are charged with. He looks at me. He's like, you don't belong here.
Right.
And he puts me in my own cell. There's guys in for like murder. It's a transit unit. So there's guys in for murder and they're getting moved from one place to another.
Oh my goodness.
There's guys who like got picked up for a $20 billion Ponzi scheme and they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison. Very sad. That guy actually lent me books, but then I had to lend books to other people. No. But But he's walking me to this cell, and he's treated me like a puppy, like a lost puppy,
Right.
which I was. I mean, you don't want to be too adorable in prison, but
Right.
it was clearly out of my
Here's not a
element.
good thing.
Yeah,
Here's
clearly
not a
out
good
of my
thing.
element. And he says to this guy, I don't know who Kodak is, and he's got gold teeth and he's got his wicks and whatever, which I didn't know what they were called until I got to prison.
Oh,
But he goes to Kodak, he goes, this guy's Jewish. And Kodak goes, I'm Jewish too.
The story was coming out. You understand? Like, everybody in the mother was sending me messages. You know, the Kodak Black he's in prison. He's going to the Jewish what do you call it? Jewish chaplain,
services.
Jewish
Yeah,
chaplain,
yeah.
Jewish services. I'm like, Kodak Black is not
The
Jewish.
chaplain at FTC Miami is a nice guy. He's an
was
interesting
he?
character. Yeah, look, it's a tough job. I mean,
I believe it. I believe it.
but
Miami's no cakewalk.
no, and you're electing to take care of men who are
Right.
locked in a cage.
In a cage. It's crazy.
And
You don't get Kodak became friends there. You
he was nice. He was a friendly guy, and he really. I ended up meeting and becoming friendly with his lawyer.
okay.
Brad Cohen, another landsman, because Kodak and I both had a friend of mine who's an attorney came in to see me, and we both got called out at the same time. We both got strip searched next to each other with a little concrete barrier between them, but we both squatted and coughed at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Our new album is coming out, Squatted and Coughed, Ari and Kodak. It's a Hamish tune.
I've been there, and it's the most uncomfortable feeling. So invasive, so beyond anything I've ever felt before.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
It's a
disgusting.
very strange feeling because you're also going like, all right, which correction officer signed up for this gig? Like, are you enjoying this? Like, you know.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway,
Okay.
it's not the time for flirting. That's the thing. Anyway, so whatever. Very very interesting experience. But again, I'm in good spirits because I'm like, this is a bogus case, and
to this point, there's nothing in you telling you that this is possibly going to send me to prison. This is, like,
no,
you
I mean, I was in prison, but I was like, I'm sure I'm out of this.
You're sure you're out of this
on
very,
the
very
weekend.
quickly.
And I mean, there are moments there where, like, you know, every second in prison is an eternity.
Yeah, of course.
You know, it was
I
fun.
don't know.
There wasn't even like.
I had a bunch of uncles and everybody in prison. They seem to enjoy it there. I understand. That's why they would keep going back. I have no idea. My grandfather, I would say also too, he was institutionalized. He spent most of his life in prison.
Yeah.
He was home for a very short while. He taught me Islam when he came out. He went in, I think, a Christian. He came out a Sunni Muslim.
Yeah.
Originally from Chicago, so it was very easy for him to gravitate to that. I think there's a very big Muslim population in Chicago also. But he was institutionalized. There was something about, I honestly believe, being in prison that brought him a certain comfort. And you're saying that you didn't experience that at all. There was zero comfort.
No. So there is, and I'll say that the process. Let's replace the word institutionalized with infantilized, right? So, we're as we mentioned, right, with this, the Jewish leadership is about elevating people, right?
Right.
What are the highest forms of charity, right? So, if the Rambam's list, that the
It's
famous
to help
list,
a person start a business, right?
invest in them, give them a loan, get them back on their feet, help them lift themselves up so they can lift other people up, right? Which is exactly
the highest
the
form of
opposite
charity according to
of the Democrat way of charity, which
Right.
is just keep people down and keep feeding them and
Right.
keeping them dependent,
Right.
right? But you want people to be independent.
Independent, right?
And so you put people in prison, and all of a sudden they're fed 3 meals a day on a schedule. They don't choose their meal. They don't even have to sit there and look at the menu, right? They don't have a real job. They have some task, but there's no agency. And when you take away a person's agency, you've infantilized them. And agency and assertiveness are very much a muscle that you need to work. You see how your children turn out is in God's hands.
You're right.
But one of the things that I have friends who are parents where I see they do something very well, where they have a child and he's just beginning to speak. Maybe he's 4 years old or I don't know. These kids don't have driver's licenses, but somewhere we'll say 4. And he's at a restaurant and he wants something, and they'll say, "Okay, well, you ask the waitress for it, and then they stiff him with the bill. No, but what you're doing is you're teaching this kid who's small and in a different environment to talk to. You're teaching your kid to talk to strangers. You're teaching your kid to be assertive and to say, "Hey, I'd like more water or a cup or whatever it is a 4-year-old needs at a restaurant."
Right.
You want me to cut a steak with this knife? Use your words.
Use your words. Right.
And that was a huge lesson for me throughout this process, which is there were times, especially early on in this process, where I had, let's say, the self, the soul, the inner voice that said, you should speak up about this thing, you should say this thing, and I didn't do it. And you can have years of regret from doing that. Rabbi Sachs writes about Yosef and the brothers and the incident before he's put in the pit.
Right.
And he says there's an interesting fact where it describes Reuven's thinking. That Reuven thinks to himself, paraphrasing, okay, I'll go and I'll save him from the pit. We'll do this as a diversion and everybody will cool down and I'll take care of it. And that Reuven realized that this wasn't the right thing that these brothers were doing. He says, but the interesting thing is that the Torah almost never discusses somebody's thoughts.
Right. That's true.
So you see it in Tanakh, but in the 5 books of Moses, in the Torah itself.
Once in a while it tells us God, maybe he regretted, God thought he regretted what he did. But you're right, it's not a common thing.
But that's also, and that's God. But God. For people, they don't share their thoughts. So he says, well, what's the lesson? He says, Reuven is the firstborn. And in that era, he was in charge of the brothers. He was the head of the tribes. And he had his birthright to lead the Jewish people and to lead these brothers. There was no objective reason. He couldn't just say, guys, we're not doing this.
Right.
We're not going to throw any of our brothers in our pit or
back
sell
in those days, people actually listened to their elders.
They listened to the elder brother. There was a hierarchy.
Of course, it was a hierarchy for sure.
So they said that the lesson is that, we all in our lives have these moments of Reuven's voice. And if your voice, if you think there's something that needs to be said, something's not right and you need to speak up about it, it's incumbent upon you to do it. Or look at the disaster that unfolded. Now, at the end, Reuven and Yehuda redeem themselves, right? They are the ones who speak up for Binyamin and they speak up to Yosef. And Yosef, and this was a giant lesson for me. We'll go backwards in time now. The lesson, there are many lessons from being in prison, but one of them was the speech that Yosef gives to his brothers, where he says, well, don't be afraid because God intended for me to be here so that I could save you guys from a famine. And so your actions, it's not that they don't matter. He tested to make sure that they repented, which they did, that they'd stand up for their other brother. Right. He knew that they regretted what they did. And what he was saying is that things will happen to us in life that are in the moment objectively or subjectively terrible. You don't want to go to prison. I do not recommend it. If there was a Yelp, I'd give these guys maybe a 1-star review. But
not something you're looking for. But
God puts you there for a reason.
Right.
And often multiple reasons. And maybe that reason isn't for yourself. Maybe it's like Moshe Rabbeinu. You're there to serve other people. You're there to lift up other people. But certainly there are people in prison who very much uplifted me. There are incredible acts of kindness and strength and generosity that you'll experience in prison. And so just as you were saying, as the darkness gets darker, the light gets brighter as well. Imagine the strength you have to be kind in a prison.
Right.
And again, you see this dichotomy of strength and weakness, of faith and fear.
And you're in prison for how long?
I was in prison for 7.5 months.
Okay, 7.5.
2 weeks in a halfway house, which is another surreal experience.
But my question is that, okay, at the beginning of the journey, like, I'm out of here, and once I'm out of here, this guy's toast. I'm gonna, I'm gonna make so much money. There has to be. You can't tell me in 7.5 months that there's not some place where you start to say to yourself, like, God, how long am I going to be in here? What's going to
Oh yeah.
what's going to be with me?
So I'm
Like,
out in 5 days. I get bonded out
uh-huh.
in 5 days.
Okay.
And I go up to New York, and I end up with this judge and Professor Dershowitz, who I knew because I'd run a pro-Israel newspaper.
Alan Dershowitz.
Alan
Yeah.
Dershowitz.
Okay.
So as Professor Dershowitz says to me, he goes, "If you got in any other judge, this case would have been tossed in a month." He says, "You couldn't have gotten a worse judge." And again, like, God decides which judge you're going to get. Although SDNY clearly is not shuffling cases randomly.
Right. Right.
And that's when, again, the inner voice failed me, because I'd come out, and this was July 2019. By October, for months, I'd be getting sicker and sicker. I had a strange respiratory illness, and the doctors couldn't seem to treat it. They were giving me muscle relaxers, and a neurologist was dealing with all this swelling in my neck, and they could see it in the MRI or CT scan MRI. And the medicines were having even worse effect. And now in hindsight, it's like, oh, it was early COVID.
It was early COVID. Right.
Because the federal detention centers where a lot of the immigration cases come through. And so you're just picking up random.
Right.
Great place to pick up a game of chess or a rare novel coronavirus.
Right.
Not so rare anymore. And not novel. But anyway, so I'm in agony. I'm not sleeping, and I'm having suicidal thoughts, and I write a suicide note, and I send it to some folks, including this guy who he and his father saw. They took advantage. They took a bulk deal. They're going to give us the money that I can pay my lawyers.
Wow.
Put this all behind me, and instead they just took the devices and didn't pay. He forwarded. We didn't know this at the time. We learned just years later. He forwarded that suicide note to either directly or through someone to the main witness in the case.
What made you write the note? Where were you? What were you feeling at the time?
I think I'd experienced this judge at a hearing. I saw that the judge had realized the prosecutor hadn't even bothered to go to the link on the telechecks and look at the online terms, that he wasn't even aware there was a contract, and that the judge made a phone call and tweaked this whole thing. I saw that, and I was also just... I was in a different place. I grew up Dati Leumi. I grew up, a Teaneck Jew, but holiest city outside of Israel, Ira Kodesh. But in fact, I'm surprised they don't build buildings in Yerushalayim out of Teaneck stone. But anyway, you manipulate the world through power, control, money, and your own intelligence versus you have to go out and put out an effort, but it's all in God's hands.
Right.
And I was panicked, and I was in a scarcity mentality, and I was in physical agony and extremely sleep deprived. And I had even emailed my trial counsel and said, it was a guy I knew from Brandeis who had been a assistant U.S. attorney in D.C., which was also a big mistake. I hired a guy not from New York, and the New York guys were like, "Well, you're not paying into the guild. You're not helping the door revolve." And so I had emailed him and said, "Look, I have this sleep tracker data. I'd even been in the emergency room in the Mount Sinai, and they diagnosed me with narcolepsy. Again, they couldn't figure out what was really going on." And so I was out of it. And there's now 3 different mental health experts who've written opinions saying, look, this guy was not mentally fit to prepare for trial. There's a ton of emails and evidence, and never got into the trial because I was just too tired to remember anything and things. So I'm in that state, and I hadn't done the work I needed to do on, as you'd say, an internal family systems type of therapy. I hadn't done the work on those hurt, wounded parts
of yourself,
the inner children that need coaching and to come to their own faith and confidence. And so I wrote this note, and it's a weak and manipulative way to cry for help. And in the note, I called this judge a corrupt Obama nominee, which he's lived into. Manifestation. And now Elon Musk agrees. So okay, we have a few things in common. the judge had two options, right? He could have said, well, this doesn't make any sense because this guy is the founder of JCOR, the largest Jewish volunteer network, and he's 37 years old, and he doesn't have a criminal background, and he's got this company, and his buddy from college is showing up to defend him. Like, this seems out of character, and it's clearly a very psychotic and overwhelmed note. This is a cry for help. He's been hospitalized repeatedly in the last few months. We need to have a mental health evaluation. We need to pause this. We need to make sure he's okay because we can't even bring him to trial. And we need to see what's really going on. But instead, he saw corrupt Obama nominee, and he went into his own rage, and he admitted this in a sealed hearing that he later denied existed, but the court reporter gave us the transcript, even though the judge denied that it existed.
So you think this
We know for a fact
was politically motivated?
this was ego. This wasn't even politics. He knew I was a public Trump supporter. If you Googled me, it was in the news in the GTA that I said. But
they're not going around arresting every Trump supporter.
Not yet.
Reason.
Not yet. Not yet. You know, maybe if Trump hadn't won, no,
they'd like to.
It's on their vision board.
Right. But the truth is, when you think about it, you say,
someone
why
called
was it
in
me?
a favor. Some well-connected landlord or whoever called in a favor and said, "Hey, put the pressure on this guy." I mean, or it's just, okay, the guy filed a charge back and he filed a police report, and the Brooklyn cop said, "Okay, I'll do a favor for this bank and I'll cover up this mistake or whatever." But we don't know why. It is strange. People ask all the time. They go, $264,000. Why are the feds getting involved?
Yeah,
This is a billing dispute. Everybody who sees this right away goes, "It's a billing dispute."
Exactly. I'll give you some community service hours or something like that. They can pick up some garbage.
Yeah,
With the jacket. The jacket is so embarrassing. You ever done community service hours? No, this is your first crime.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so for me, I've done community service.
You had the jacket.
You're picking it up. You have the jacket on.
You got a little gripper, right? Yeah.
You get a gripper also too.
You get a little dinosaur.
With the gripper, you have to give back.
Yeah, it's all right. You can order one on Amazon. So basically, he admitted in this sealed hearing. He goes, after that letter, he made a phone call to the head of the General Crimes Division of SDNY. He goes to get them extra supervision. We show up at the next hearing. There's an entirely different prosecution team, and there's this crazy theory of, you must have structured your online terms to have a subpage. So you have like the main terms page, and then you have your dispute terms, privacy policy, payment terms. And he goes, you must have done that so that he wouldn't read the subpage of the terms. Now, I had nothing to do with the structure of the terms. Our lawyers, a major international law firm, structured the terms. And even they didn't structure the terms because they just copied Airbnb's terms almost verbatim, like paragraph for paragraph.
Wow.
Airbnb could have turned and said, "Hey, you guys violated our copyright."
You were 100% framed. There was a whole entire system against you. And
I was a judge he's a made man, and he's handled a lot of brushed a lot of Epstein cases away and done a lot of favors, and he's an Obama nominee, and it's just happened yesterday, but I said to the prosecutor the rookie who'd made a mistake, they brought him back in after the trial, and they brought him back in at a time when the guy who actually prosecuted wouldn't have been able to answer questions honestly on the record. So they sent him away, and they brought this guy back, and he could be like, "Oh, I wasn't involved in the trial." Right? And I said, "Look, you're being like a capo. You're like, that I'm innocent. That these witnesses hid all of these emails and hid all of this evidence. I have this contract." His last stunt was to say, "Oh, well, when you started the company, you had this one service called Sublet Spy that would scan Airbnb and match illegal listings to Zillow listings. And we start this intercom under that company. And then we had to break it off into another corporate entity because a physical intercom and installations needs a different kind of insurance than just software on the internet, right? Sending people into buildings and you're wiring things. And so when we spoke to the insurance company, they're like, "Well, really, it's cheaper to just go incorporate and split it off," or at least the insurance sales guy. So the prosecutor's tactic now is to say, "Oh, well, when these guys signed up in 2016, GateGuard didn't exist. But GateGuard was part of this company and then split off, just like many companies. Amazon has dozens and dozens of the van delivery company and the plane company and the factory, this factory and that factory and this warehouse and that, they're all different incorporations and LLCs.
Companies, right.
So he goes, oh, his tactic is to say, well, these terms couldn't possibly have been in existence in 2016 because Gate Card didn't exist. But he knows that the corporate entity exists, and he has the emails with this main witness ordering the device in 2016. So I'm like, how could you say that we didn't exist in 2016 when you have this email thread of the guy ordering the device in 2016, and we were in the real deal. I don't have to tell the Jewish audience about what the real estate publications are, but the real deal in 2016. It was October 2016. So
here, the thing is, for hearing all of this from me,
yeah,
is that I've heard it said by other people before, but you actually are helping me, or I'm actually realizing they can make up whatever they want. Whoever they want,
they straight up lie.
They can go after.
And then people go, oh, well, you have an appeals court. Well, those are just the same guys in the same building, 2 floors up, who got a promotion, who eat lunch together and go to the same, sure, exceptionally boring parties, and then there's probably parties that aren't that boring but are borderline illegal. But whatever, those are conspiracy theories for Twitter, but X. But the brazenness with which they'll lie. In fact, it's on the docket, docket number 321-1. 24 Orthodox rabbis from all different sects, from the Yeshiva University to Yeshivot in Yerushalayim, to Chabad. You've heard of them. They're a Hasidic movement approximately everywhere. They've run out of places to send people. Now they'll assign a rabbi just to hang out on your left side. It's Chabad of slightly-to-the-left.org, and they want a monthly donation. You just talk, oh, hey, Rabbi, okay. Did you put on tefillin? We're right there. What do you mean? You're right. Anyway, so... these rabbis wrote a letter to the judge and go, you should resign and you should recuse and resign, because what he did was he said, we drafted the accounts. It happened to be the Friday before Pesach, and they say, well, you must. The judge goes, oh, you must have drafted these accounts the Friday before Pesach so that these guys wouldn't see the banking alerts. That you drafted the accounts, which is absurd for a few reasons. One is there was a 7-day hold, which would have been nothing. Nothing happened for all of Pesach, but also Pesach started Friday night, so the first 2 days of the holiday were Shabbat and Sunday. Banks are closed anyway. Chol Moed, they would have gotten the alert if you deposit on Friday. The whatever activity, even if there's no hold, is going to happen on Monday. These guys are all at Great Adventure or Disney on their cell phones. They're going to see the alert on their phone, and I know even if you're waiting in line for a roller coaster, you see a $260,000 draft, you're gonna send an email or make a phone call. Right. And so the rabbis, lawyers, everybody said to the judge, like, this is like a blood libel. Like, you're trying to paint the defendant as a bad Jew, to say, like, to convince this non-Jewish jury that he's a terrible Jew for taking advantage of the other Jews by drafting the account before Passover, but it's not even technically feasible. And then what the judge did on top of that is he made up a quote I never said. He said, you told the clients you're going to draft the account before Pesach, so they won't be able to track it back. There's nothing in evidence. I never said that. It doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't work. And so the rabbis saw that and they said, this is like, this is going too far. He dragged me into court on Yontif. We had a court on Friday. He kept it going into Shabbat, even after we pointed out, hey, it's going to be Shabbat. This is not a violent crime. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my question is.
So I
want to ask you a question about coming home, and what do you do after that experience, after being framed, being put behind bars, being in prison for 7 months. Against your will on a bogus case. What do you do after that?
Okay, so I think that this is a lesson that the Rebbe would stress a lot to his shluchim, who would get quote unquote stuck in airports, right? He goes, well, you're never stuck, right? Like, the place you don't want to be is the place God put you. You don't want to go to prison, but I'm glad I was there, and it was a very painful experience. The judge denied me being taken out to get medical care, and I needed steroid injections in my spine just to be able to sit and move after it. And I'll probably need some surgery. It's a very painful and inhumane experience, and it shouldn't be that way, especially if you believe that people are spiritual beings who can be redeemed. But I met people there. There's one guy, Brian Zader, is a Jewish guy. He and his brother and a few friends, they robbed 8 banks, and they got caught on the 9th.
Wow.
He was a 22-year-old guy. His father had lied about his age and been drafted into the Marines when he was 16, came back with PTSD, raised his kids like they were always going to be in a war, which if they make Aliyah, maybe it's not a bad. And Brian was a newlywed dad with a baby, and he was worried about paying the bills. Again, it all comes from fear. Prison is just a magnet. The guards are people with PTSD and fear, and the people in prison come from a scarcity mentality and fear. You get rid of the fear, you don't go to prison. And he served 24 years of a 45-year sentence. So now, thank God, it looks like it'll get reduced, and he'll be out in hopefully in a year or so. And friends and lawyers and folks are working on it. But he had a choice, right? He could have said, "Look, I'm going to die in prison, or I'm going to be 76 when I leave." And instead, he wrote to the Tony Robbins Foundation, and they sent him books, and he started doing Tony Robbins classes and teaching the other men in prison, and doing yoga and Tai Chi and mindfulness exercises. Wow. And every guy that he's coached has not come back to prison. And
so there is a such thing as rehabilitation.
100%.
That's always the biggest question with the justice system is if.
So that's the biggest thing.
It works.
And it comes down to belief, because when someone believes in you, it's incredibly empowering. Every student that was struggling and turned it around has a story about a teacher or a family member that believed in them and stuck with it, and figured out how to make it work for them. Right? And there was an experience where I was sitting at a table in this G unit, and it's one of these like 8-seat picnic tables. There was 7 black guys and me. And I said to them, how many books did you have as a kid in your house growing up? And not one had a single book.
Wow.
They were all in for drug trafficking or similar type, gang related.
And we barely had books in our high school. Let's talk about this. Even in the high school, we were using packets.
It comes to this idea of like, Brian talks about, he calls it the grape soda problem. He says, when you grow up in these communities, you open the fridge and all there is to drink is this grape drink.
Grape soda.
And you don't know about milk. You don't know about apple juice or orange juice. You have a scarcity mentality. You don't know about drinking water and being healthy, right? It wasn't taught to you.
Right.
And that expands out. If you don't have books, then your only careers that you see as a kid are, you could be a gang member, you could be a police officer, you could be a rapper, an athlete.
Yep.
You could go work at the Walmart. And so what are the sexy jobs? Well, they don't teach them the math, because if they understood basic math, they'd never become a drug dealer.
Right, exactly.
You're going to lose money, and the risk reward is terrible.
That's the glorification of that lifestyle.
But they don't know another option. So people go, well, why don't you just get on a bus and go to the next town? And they go, but they don't know how. They don't know the next town. They think the world is like this. It's like on the way here, we're in Beit
I know this very well.
I was taken, you guys were nice enough to send a car from Tel Aviv. And every time I leave Tel Aviv, which I should do more often, and that's Tel Aviv telling me. No. Every time I leave Tel Aviv and you look at the gorgeous hills of Israel, you go, oh my God, why am I not like just once a week, like coming and just looking out the window? Right. And you forget that there's another world out there. And then when you travel, right, as begrudging as it is, right, you're an entertainer. It's like, oh, great, I got to go on a plane. But then you do, and your brain starts working differently, and it sees different ideas, good or bad sometimes. But like, these guys live in a mental ghetto more than a physical ghetto.
Right.
And it's somehow still like, it's the failure of the algorithms, because whatever everyone's looking at in your neighborhood is what you're seeing on Instagram and whatever.
Right.
So we started working on a project. We call it the Jewish Prison Book Project. It's not Jewish books, but it's based on like Jewish values. And like using AI to generate the content, cheaper than licensing books. Where you go, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to send a book to the man or woman inside and to their kid on the outside, and hopefully we'll get the prison systems one by one to agree to give them extra phone minutes, because you're literally you only get 300 minutes a whole month,
Wow.
which is less than 15 minutes a day,
Wow.
less than 10 minutes a day. To say, okay, if you're going to read to your kid, you're going to read about validating each other's feelings, about being assertive, right? Not suffering the Ruvain's voice issue,
Which is
about
a major
career,
issue.
behavior issues, mindfulness. And it's kind of like that Mr. Miyagi style of education where like the dad or the mom thinks that they're reading to the little kid, but the dad and the mom are also learning the skills
At the same time.
and they don't have to be embarrassed about their reading levels or whatever. And people are shocked, right? To you, it's not surprising. Hey, as you said, we didn't have books in high school, let alone as a little kid.
Right.
But think about in the Jewish community, like they give kids like, tactile playbooks before their eyesight is even good enough to read letters on a page.
Exactly.
And so people say like, well, could you reform the system? Is there a better alternative to prison? And having been inside, the answer is 100%. There are a few people, a very small percentage, who have, let's say, biological or physical issues that we do not know yet how to cure or treat in a way that's safe. And so they need to be kept away. And maybe they're dangerous to children or they're dangerous to people of any age. Okay, that's a tiny percentage of the issue. Then there's a group of people who have a tremendous amount of trauma or a very deep trauma. We know how to treat trauma now. And there's both the now RFK Jr. and others are I think it's the Joe Rogan effect. Psychedelic medicine is increasingly accepted and popular and effective. But there's internal family systems therapy, which is sort of like Jungian therapy for dummies, a non-confrontational way of facing your pain and gradually working through it. But that means that these people could be out of prison in 3 years and leave a different version of themselves than they came in. And then you just have an education issue. People who their intelligence is in other areas of life and they're not going to figure this stuff out for themselves. And they were never taught it. And they were never shown these options. There was a good friend of Brian, and he was a nice guy to me as well in prison, a guy they called Muslim Mike. And I wrote, you guys can share a link, but I wrote essays about some of these guys like Brian and Mike is telling me about the story. And he was a father who was worried about paying for the diapers and the formula. And he admits, he goes, I was an adrenaline junkie, and he robbed the Brinks trucks, the money trucks to get money to pay for diapers and for groceries. And he's a black man who became a Muslim, not a novel story, but and the Muslims in the FCI Miami got along very well with the Jews. And he said this thing to me once, and he said, I knew about the risk of death. I knew about getting shot. I knew about the risk of prison, but I didn't know that I'd be missing taking my daughter to ballet class. I didn't know about life. I would have chosen life.
Wow.
And which is a very Jewish idea,
very
right?
Very Jewish idea.
Choose life.
That's amazing.
But in order to choose life, you have to know
it's an option.
That it's an option. And throughout history, the Jewish people have been the people of the book. And so how do you stop the cycle of the kids following their fathers into prison? My last night, they moved me back into this room they called the Glass House. And it's a 60-bed, 2-level U-shape, kind of open dorm. You have these low cubicle walls. There's 2 guys to a room. He's since been moved, but Brian had been in that room. Mike was in that room. And I get moved to the last night up to what they call the black section of the room with this guy, Calvin Jr. And Calvin Jr. is worried about his son, Calvin Jr. I think there's a lot of Calvin Jr.'s in the family. And basically Sfardim, you got a good name, just keep using it. You save a lot on monogramming. Look, we got you a jacket. I think this was Calvin Jr.'s jacket.
I
So
hold all black people Sephardim.
very extra smart. And so, it's like my Cuban friends. It's like all the same name, live on the same street, and they get each other's mail. So here's this guy, gold teeth, big wigs, tattoos on the face, on the neck. And I one of the things that got me through prison was this idea that like God's got you there for a reason, and you get to leave when you're done with
Whatever that mission is.
whatever you're there for. And he's very concerned about his son because his son is now, I think, 16, and he seems to be he's very smart. The men and the women I didn't meet women in prison, but the men in prison are very proud of their children, and they care about their children, and they read to them, and they admonish their kids not to follow in their ways. And they draw them pictures, and they ask. I do like architectural renderings and drawings, and I would do one every day, and they'd see it, and they asked me to draw pictures. They asked me to draw tattoos a lot. I'm like, I'm not going to draw you a tattoo, but I'll draw you a picture or whatever.
Right.
So Cal's worried about his son not following his mother into being a dentist or a dental hygienist, but following his father into being a gangbanger. Oh. And so we end up having this discussion, this white Jewish guy and Calvin into the night about validating his teenage son's feelings about wanting to be cool, wanting the girls to respect him, that these are real feelings, that these are real desires, and then having discussions about other ways to achieve those needs without following this terrible life, and then book recommendations for him so that when he gets out, he has job applications. But because his son is going to emulate his father.
Right.
And so if he says, well, let me show you what I'm doing now. I'm studying these careers. I'm studying these behavior skills. I'm studying, these interpersonal skills. The son's going to do that on the street. Son's going to say, I got the same book you're reading. Let's discuss the book. Like when you're a kid, your father's reading a magazine or a newspaper. It's the most interesting magazine or newspaper in the house. I remember my dad would always complain and be like, this book's been sitting on the coffee table all week. I'm home for Shabbat, and now you got to read this book or this magazine. Like, why now it's interesting, right? So like kids will emulate their parents, and kids will emulate their parents who are in prison. And so if you give the parents in prison educational books, if you put, TED Talks and educational and job skills and behavior skills and therapy skills videos on the tablets instead of just movies and games, the conversations the parents have with the kids will inspire the kids and inspire the parents to behave. And there's 1,000 hours every day in prison. It is the slowest moving time, other than having a loved one who's unhealthy. Being in prison is the slowest you will ever see a clock hand circle. And I read entire Mesechets of Gemara, and I was the Balkoria. I was able to lane because and be like, you've got again 1,000 hours in the day. There's a tremendous amount of time, which means sentences can be much shorter because 1 year should be counted mentally as like 10, and if you're smart, maybe even 100. But we're not using that time to educate the men inside and to help that radiate outwards. And to go full circle, it's what you said. Prison is an incredibly dark place. It is one of the darkest places in the world. And Baba Batra says that captivity is worse than death and starvation because it includes all of it together. Because at any moment, you can die and they're starving you. And the Jewish community has to do a much better job of Pidyon Shvuim and learning about it. But
redeeming captives.
Redeeming captives.
So listen, I could go on talking with you for hours, and there's a few different points, but one of the main points is that when we're talking about rehabilitation and how to help, and obviously coming from I know you use a different word, but what I usually refer to as being institutionalized, which doesn't have to be in prison. A person could be in a prison of themselves, as you said, coming from the communities that I came from, coming from all of what I've seen. There was a major shift at one point I remember in my life. I remember there were two things. There was one time when my father said to me, that he said to me that when it becomes cool to the young men that referring to a lot of these guys who are in the streets in and out of the prison, right? The largest population of people inside the prison happen to be African American or black, whatever. I prefer black, just also because it goes with my name. However, but he said is that not only people are worried about father absence, right? The mentality has to be is that they need to see how cool it is to be a grandfather, let alone just to be a father. That when the mind shifts to the great, what we would say nachat ruach, or great gratification that a person will receive from seeing the next generation, what that does to a person once there's a mind, there has to be a shift in the mind. And I remember right before me and my wife had moved out of the neighborhood that we were living in, she had a friend who, there was a certain individual I grew up with who fathered a lot of her children, and I think all of her children. And it's safe to say he was, he was pretty much, he was a deadbeat. And, somehow he came back enough to make babies, but outside of that, he wasn't present. And she asked my wife, she said, "What makes your husband want to be there, like to build a family with you, and all, like what's the difference?" And for me personally, I just I told my wife. She said, "What do I tell her?" I says because the definition of cool became something completely different to me. The definition of what's cool to me is much different than anything else that we grew up and the people that we looked up
Yeah,
to.
the guy who's taking care of a family has reached a level of cool,
Right.
and realizes, people joke, oh, dad shoes. Yeah, because that stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Right.
Because
Right.
that's not what makes you cool. I'll add to that one of the biggest lessons here, which I got through the help of both faith and through the psychedelic therapy, I came in through a friend, a regular at the Chabad of South Beach, actually, who's an internal family systems therapist. She brought this stuff up, and I looked into it, and I started doing this therapy. And the idea is basically that we have these hurt children inside of us. They go through, you have these moments in your life where you experience a trauma, a rejection, an abandonment. As a child, you see it, or as a teenager, and you adopt this personality or this schema that you'll then see life through that lens at certain times. That part of you will take over and blend into become your personality in that moment. And if you've ever done something great or not great and gone, I can't believe I did that. I wish I didn't do that. That's that part. Learning how to parent that part, right? Learning how to be a parent to yourself. It fits so much in the Jewish idea that like you have to lift other people up, and in order to do that, you have to be able to lift yourself up.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ari. Appreciate you for coming on. Like I said, we could go on over and over and over and over again. I really appreciate you coming. And I want to bless you that Hashem should continue to strengthen you on your path. You should have complete clarity. Most people don't understand that more than anything else, especially in this time in this generation, where there's so much confusion at the click of a button, at the click of a tick of a phone, that there's so much confusion. So I pray that Hashem will grant you clarity in every single thing that you do. You should be blessed in every single thing that you do, and you should be able to see and witness in this time and in this world, be able to garner and to be able to hone in and to be able to see all the fruits of your labor.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Shkoyach.